So the funniest thing happens to me. My husband and I were in El Salvador, and when we get home, my daughter's telling me about how my mom, which their grandma who was watching them while we were in El Salvador, took them to the bowling alley. So she says, "Mom, we were eating dinner, and there was these girls fighting." And I was like, "They were?" She's like, "Yeah, they were scratching each other and punching each other." And I'm like, "In the bowling alley?" I'm like flipping out, like, what is happening at this ghetto bowling alley? You know what I'm saying? And she was like, "No, Mom, it was on TV." And I was like, "So, tell me about this. She's like, "Well, there was these two girls and they were punching each other. There was blood everywhere. They're scratching each other and they were fighting so bad. And all they got out of it was a belt." So I obviously go to explain to her, like, well, Leia, it wasn't just a belt, but in this instance, this belt is actually the trophy. And of course, my daughter's like, that is, using her small words, like, basically, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Why would these people get into a ring, punch and scratch each other and hurt each other just to put this shiny belt on? So I had to explain to her how that these people actually put value on this belt. So to my daughter, this belt is just a belt, but to human beings, apparently we put value on this belt. So I'm thinking about all the lengths that people would go to and go through to get this belt. When you hear it phrased by a child, you're like, this is absolutely absurd. And the funniest thing about this is, as human beings, we want to watch that. But it started making me think about the scripture in the Bible that I want to share with you. In 1 Corinthians 9:24, it says, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it, and everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with the uncertainties, thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified." We have to understand that there's a crown that needs to be obtained. There's a crown that we should be running after. But what happens is, as human beings and as Christians, we place value on an imperishable crown. And what happens when we do that is we run our race, and basically we run and run and run. And we end up at this place where we exhaust ourselves chasing these imperishable crowns. So we have to be so conscious is the word. We have to be so conscious that we don't let the world define what is valuable to us, that we don't let ourselves define what is valuable for us. Because if we let the world define that, and if we let ourselves define that, and everything in our life that's valuable is defined by human beings, what happens is we're going to keep running, we're going to exhaust ourselves, and we're never going to have time to chase that crown that we know that God has placed value on. So we have to go through our lives, and really, as my daughter did, she kind of, we see MMA fighting for what MMA fighting is because we know what MMA fighting is. But for someone like my daughter who didn't know what it is, she kind of stepped back and saw MMA fighting with this other outside perspective. And she saw it as basically absolutely absurd that people would even do that to get a belt. But what we have to do as Christians is we have to step back and look at situations with our spiritual eyes and say, are we placing value on something that we know God wouldn't want us to place value on? Are we placing value on natural things that only lead us to a dead end? Are we placing value on things that we keep chasing it up to exhaustion, that we don't have time to chase those things in which God has placed value on? So we really need to check our heart motivation, say, what am I spending time on? What am I putting my focus on? What are my eyes constantly looking at? And have I placed value on something that is leading me to this place of exhaustion for an imperishable crown? Or am I really running after that race to obtain that crown that God has in store for each and every one of us? Because we know God has given us a purpose in our life, and He has these beautiful, awesome plans for each and every one of us. So I want to encourage you to ask God and really seek with your heart and step back and look at all the situations and circumstances in your life and say, God, where is it that you want me to place value? God, where do you want my focus to go? Because God, I want to serve you. And I want to make sure that my life is chasing after the things that you want me to chase after, so I'm not exhausting myself and running out of breath when it comes to chasing after those things that God, you want for my life.